Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast. On today's show, we have Mike Haeg. He's the VP of Automotive at CarWars. Mike, welcome to the show.
Brian, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. Thanks a lot.
Well, Mike, we are filming this podcast at a very, very interesting time in the auto industry. We are going through the initial shutdowns and quarantines in the U.S. here for the coronavirus. And I wanted to have you back onto the podcast because now more than ever, the basic blocking and tackling of sales process has to be re-examined. And now that we have a number of disruptions on how automotive retail is being done, I think dealers need to kind of get a refresher on what is possible today with the CarWars technology. Before we jump into that, Mike, give everyone a little background on yourself and how long you've been with CarWars.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just celebrated. It's funny. I noticed this in I think on LinkedIn or something, my 10-year anniversary with the company, like last week. So I've been working in this world of phone technology, but phone process and phone expertise, I guess you could call it, for our company and what we want to help dealers do for about 10 years now. And we're just a bunch of geeks that we're in love with the phone. And I'd throw myself in that category too.
Well, wonderful. Well, I've had the opportunity to work with your company with a number of our shared clients. And of course, owning the phone and really having accountability on the phone is super important. Let's talk about some current events. We are having BDCs kind of distributed now. People are working from home. And if there wasn't a BDC, even Salesforce members are out working at home. And one of the big questions, if I was a dealer principal, was, are the phones being handled as well as they should? When you have a BDC manager, you can kind of keep an eye on people in the room. Are they there? Are they taking calls? Are they making calls? How is CarWars and your technology platform helping dealers during a groundbreaking change with many employees working from home?
Yeah, groundbreaking is such a good way to put it. There's not a whole lot of we've got precedents for challenges in the market, but not a whole lot of precedents for potentially having to work from home or closing dealerships half the house. So I'd answer that question two ways. One is just the technology and let's call it phone routing or phone solutions to ensure that dealers get those phone calls where they need to go despite changes. So maybe the sales department has to physically close down, but we want to make sure that those calls do end up somewhere to somebody who could help. Maybe both sides of the house close down. Maybe the BDC has to go work from home. So all those different options. The key thing is we're just already working with dealers across the country with sometimes very simple but important solutions to make sure those calls get routed where they need to go. So that might be routing it to agents' cell phones. That might be adding custom bridges or IVR, phone tree, depending on what you want to call it, but a custom phone bridge that has a custom greeting that then informs the caller because of the situation, this and this is happening. It might be scheduling. So changes in hours are happening. So maybe we need to change the way our schedules work for our phone calls and they route here at this time and there at that time. So the most important thing, step one, is just to get the call where it needs to go, given unique circumstances, which can inevitably vary by dealer. And then step two is, are we handling the call well? It's still likely just a sales or a service opportunity, potentially, we hope. I'm still listening to phone calls at dealers in certain markets where they're just looking to see if the car's available and want to talk about it. So that's where that phone process, phone training, and phone integration comes in, so managers can stay on top of those phone calls no matter where they happen to be located.
Well, no, I'm very interested in what's happening in the auto industry. I have some areas of the country where there's more freedom and travel and flexibility, and others like the Philadelphia market, where many dealers have closed because either their employees had corona or it was a city mandate. What I do know is that dealers that I'm speaking with are seeing a drop in showroom visits and a drop in service appointment shows. And we have to rethink our ability to bring the dealership to them. But I know it sounds almost corny, but that phone call is even more valuable today if a dealer's seeing a 20 or 25 or 30% decrease in opportunities. Maybe this is the perfect storm for dealers really to get serious about handling the phones right. This is something, Mike, that CarWars have been talking about for years. What's the big problem for dealers really to lean in and get the phones right?
Yeah, I think that the challenge has probably I know it's long been just a feeling that, hey, so aside from Corona, aside from the challenges that we're experiencing now, just the idea with the phone has, in our opinion, and what dealers have told us, they come up and tell us this, is, hey, it's just always felt like a big pain in the butt. Like, I get it, Mike. I know the phone's important, right? I've been hearing that for years. I've been to the conferences, Mike, and I go back to my store and I try to manage the phone. And then inevitably, I'm having to listen to 100 phone calls just to find the calls that matter. And I don't have time for that. And I don't have a simple process that kind of checks the box for, hey, 15 minutes a day to feel like I'm in a good place with the phone. I don't have that as a manager. So it's not a matter of dealerships don't realize the phone's important or have never realized that. It's more of just I can't quite get my head around it, and therefore it's easy to go move on to something else. So that's the challenge that we've always seen, and dealers tell us that over and over again. They say it's just, I've always felt like it's a pain in the butt. So whether that's 6 months ago when times were a little bit normal or today, the key for us is helping dealers keep it simple, recognize the opportunity in every phone call, and really act on those opportunities, knowing you're right, you might not get as many. The phone might not be ringing as much here for the next few weeks, but when it does, the time is now to make sure that lead gets handled properly.
And of course, CarWars has pioneered with the acronym CRISP, which is a way in which each call is inspected and scored. And for dealers who are not familiar with CarWars, that's the big heavy lifting that I believe is so powerful with the platform, is that a manager can go into a dashboard and see which employees are struggling with different parts of the call. Did they greet the customer? Did they obtain the information? Did they ask or request, for them to come in for an appointment? I really love how simple you broke down each call into those different letters. Mike, how long do you think it would take a manager to review all their salespeople using your summary dashboard? What does it take? What's the commitment instead of listening to hundreds of calls or looking at pages of report? What are you telling dealers when our system's in place and you let us do the heavy lifting? This is, give me this amount of time, and I absolutely will promise you, if you take action on the data, you're going to see a significant lift in showroom appointments and sales.
Man, that's a great question. So here's what some of our top managers, top stores do. Their morning looks something like this. And I'll kind of talk about how much time this takes. But first thing is they hop into CarWars, or they have it emailed to them, but just a list or easy access to yesterday's previous phone calls that were, let me put a disclaimer on that are sales calls.
Right.
So yesterday's sales calls. The reality is, even for big stores, we're not talking about hundreds. For some stores, we're talking about 10 to 15 valuable, important sales calls that are worth taking the time to listen to a few of them and just get a feel for what's actually happening on the phone. If you want to know what's actually happening on the phone, listen to a few sales calls. They might be 3 minutes long. Some of them might be 1 minute long, but you'll know quickly what's actually happening in the trenches instead of having to guess. So a lot of our managers do that. It's kind of like we say what gets measured gets managed. So for them, just taking a few minutes every morning to listen to previous day's sales calls helps them feel like, okay, I kind of know what's going on here. The other piece of that, or another way you can do that, I should say, is in the CRM. So we're very big on phone integration and CRM. So listening to those phone calls right there in the CRM and making sure the call was logged and there's a salesperson's name next to it, that's a 15-minute exercise that has tremendous downstream value, because all of a sudden we know that processes are getting created. Salespeople now have leads in their name. Outbound phone calls are happening. Tasks are happening. Email follow-up is happening simply by nurturing those inbound sales calls. And again, I'm not saying all the calls. I'm saying the sales calls just for 15 minutes per day. The other thing that I do, or that I hear managers that has a kind of a huge impact for a 15-minute exercise, 10-minute exercise, is listening to a good sales call and maybe not a great sales call in a morning meeting. So that might be a little bit challenging if we don't have these morning meetings standing around anymore. But the idea is just get people on your team to listen to phone calls that are both good and where we could get better. It's never about kind of belittling anyone. It's just about how we can get better. And then finally, the third thing, this one might be the most important, but our staff activity report just has every day, each salesperson, inbound, outbound activity. It is your straight data by salesperson, who's making outbound calls, who's talking to customers, who's taking inbound calls. We've got stores that look at that 3 times a day. Check in, check up, check out. And if you're not making your calls, it's pretty easy to tell.
Well, I love the idea of the morning meeting with a little twist. I love the stores that, of course, have their morning meeting and use the CRM. So they'll go into the meeting by saying, all right, let's see what we had in the CRM. And okay, who has an appointment for today? And someone raises their hand and they go right into the CRM. Okay, let's see how prepared you are. Let's see your notes. Oh, look, there's no notes in the CRM. How could you possibly prepare? Oh, I have my notes here on my phone. Okay, no, it's in the CRM. What I also love is the managers that say, okay, let's kind of spin the wheel or spin the bottle. Let's listen to how some of you answered calls. Okay, let's spin the bottle, spin the wheel. Boom. Okay, Kathy, let's listen to your call from yesterday. And here's what I found is that when you randomly pick a record from the CRM to see how somebody is engaging, if you randomly pick a call, no one feels that you're picking on them. And some of them are home runs and the people are very proud, but no one wants to be the person in the meeting that looks or sounds horrible. And so I think accountability is another way in which CarWars is being under leveraged. Yes, the manager can look at any one agent and see how they're doing. They can rank the agents based on their productivity or on their effectiveness. But I think those call recordings are tremendous educational opportunities that the whole team needs to understand and listen. What's best practice, how to overcome objections. And I don't think as many dealers are using it in that fashion.
I think you get a lot of bang for your buck when you do that. It's a very with what you just described. It's a simple process. Again, it's not super time consuming at all, but the value, kind of the ROI on that time with building a phone culture, because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build a culture that just says we understand the phone is important and we take it seriously. If there's not that underlying belief starting from the top, it's got to start from the top, that there's an underlying belief that, hey, the phone is important and we take care of our customers on the phone and we see the phone as a great way to beat the competition. If that doesn't exist from the top, then we're already starting behind. But when the top then, leadership, managers, then invest that 10 to 15 minutes to do that kind of roulette of listening to phone calls, spin the bottle, it just has a really big impact on the culture and the mindset around the phone. that lasts much longer, than just the 5 minutes you put in. So yeah, we're big believers in that. I totally understand right now, as of March 18th, that's might be a little bit trickier, but what if you did this? What if you were a manager who, maybe your sales team is now officially distributed, which I'm seeing. You listened to a phone call in CarWars that was great. It was handled really well, whatever the circumstances for that might be, but it was done well, and it's worth sharing. And you forward that call on to your entire team and have them listen to the recording, or you hop on a call with that person who handled the call and talk to them about that call and give them a virtual high five. You're just building confidence and building that culture that says the phone matters. And it's the little things that add up.
Well, I'm also seeing, Michael, that more and more people are in this forced remote workforce are using like Zoom meeting or other tools that they're requiring their BDC team to be kind of like constantly on Zoom. So you still have that coaching environment. So using CarWars in that type of collaborative environment would allow them to listen to a call all together. Again, work as a group. I think we need to rethink how we can use technology to create these virtual pods of sales teams.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it happens to be Zoom. It happens to be people sitting at home. But it's pretty incredible what that Zoom technology can do in making sure that, or just in creating an environment of we're all here together on a meeting. I can see everybody's faces. I can see my manager's face. I can hit play on a phone call. Everybody can listen to it at once. Yeah, it's different. It's different for this industry for sure. But I was listening to some dealers talk this morning about the industry, and they just said, hey, you got to get creative. Whether you like it or not, things are here. So you just got to get creative.
Absolutely.
Deal with it.
That's what I've been doing, proactively posting stuff online to help dealers understand what new video messaging they should be considering. Obviously, we're talking about some very basics, but now is the time. This is what I'm telling dealers. If you have any downtime or any slowage going on, this is the time to get the basics nailed down and to really evaluate what you're doing. Now, Mike, I know that there's some new software tech that CarWars came out called Callbox, which gives managers and teams even more tools to support their employees when they're on the phone with a customer. Mike, give our listeners today a little overview of what the Callbox technology does.
Yeah, that's we're finding increasingly important, this tool, in a time like right now. So it's pretty exciting. And really, when I say exciting, I mean kind of genuinely, because dealers are finding it can help them, which is what we want to hear more than anything. So imagine just a communication dashboard or platform for a manager. So this works in a store. It works in a BDC. I've seen it, but it also could work in a more distributed environment. But where a manager is able to see who's on the phone right now, who's handling an inbound call, who's handling an outbound call. They can actually click on a button that says open in CRM. So they click on that button of that phone call, and it drops them right into the CRM, right into the customer record, if one exists, to see exactly who this customer is. So you're one click away from a live phone call to a live customer. We have service departments using this because it gives them an easier way and sales, but easier way to know who the customer is right as they start talking to the customer. They know who they are because they hop right into the CRM or maybe a service dashboard. But the key thing is managers just now have clear insight into what's actually happening on the phone, not after the call, but during the call. So there's 3 key things that we like that dealers can do or managers can do. They can listen to a live phone call as it's happening. So imagine, Brian, that you know your salesperson's on a call or service. You can tap into that phone call and listen to it. You're muted. Nobody will ever know you're on the call, I promise. But you can hear that conversation. The other thing you can do is hop into the call and actually talk to your salesperson, kind of whisper to them, but the customer can't hear you. So you're kind of providing some behind the scenes feedback. Yeah. It's kind of like a little, I like to call it kind of whispering in their ear. And the third is almost like a phone TO, but the manager can hop on the call, and actually it becomes a 3-way call. So they can talk to the salesperson and to the customer. And then in that case, the salesperson might say something like, hey, let me get my manager to talk through this. So Gosh, the key is just we're really, really good at helping dealers understand what happened on the phone call very quickly after the call. Now we're giving them the tools at their fingertips to be involved with the call during the call, which is even more valuable as these phone calls become more precious.
And absolutely they are. And Mike, that's why I wanted to have you on. One of the last things I wanted to cover again this week, and I called you in and said, Mike, I think it's time to have you on the podcast. Dealers have been calling me saying, Brian, I'm nervous. I want to reduce my marketing costs, and I try to quell the panic and say, now listen, we may be in a few weeks, but let's pivot your marketing message, not just cancel your advertising. And I've been doing a good job with that. But there is some real concerns that if manufacturers are shutting down their factories for a few weeks, or if their dealership is closed, there's some advertising that can stop or pause, especially click-based advertising, say that's promoting service if the service drive is closed. But my point was that every dealer that called me this week and gave me access to their analytics, they didn't have their phone call tracking working. So I had no idea how many calls were really sales opportunities. They didn't have events set up for mobile click to call, and they didn't have goals set up for call conversion, and they weren't recording their calls. And yet they're calling me saying, Brian, what can I cut or what can I change? And I tell them, well, listen, the phones are your number one conversion channel. Why wouldn't you integrate this into your marketing? This brings back the conversation of DNI or dynamic number insertion. Mike, how important is associating phone calls to specific marketing campaigns?
Well, I can answer that question even more confidently as of the past couple of weeks. And I've always been answering that question confidently. The answer is very, very important. We know that there's a lot of money being spent. And Brian, you know this, you do such a great job of kind of advocating for proper, smart, intelligent spend on marketing. And if it works, do it, and if you don't know, what are your decisions being based off of? So the key for us is saying, hey, if you're spending a lot of money on digital marketing, and I use digital marketing kind of as a catch-all for all sorts of things, whatever that might be, then and you want to drive phone leads, and those phone leads right now represent the most important thing that you could possibly happen, and the fundamentals are more important now than ever, then gosh, it's critical to say, hey, what are we doing that's driving phone leads? Because if you're missing that gap from your digital online spend to offline conversion, then you're kind of floating around in the dark a little bit, or a lot of it, I should say. So very, very important to say, if I spent this here, did it drive me phone leads? And that can help you have a really healthy and productive conversation with your third parties, with your other agencies as well, because they very often are doing a good job. They're driving the leads that we need, but the conversation gets tricky when we just don't know, because we're not connecting those calls to offline calls to online conversions or online sessions.
That's right. And one of the things that we presented a number of times at conferences that we host and others that I was a guest speaker at was a study from CarWars with over $1 million in AdWords spend, where only 11% of the AdWords phone calls were for sales opportunities. And some dealers say, yep, that's exactly what's happening with me. 8 out of 10 calls or 9 out of 10 calls are for service. Now, some of that is because if you buy the dealer's name, and most dealers are 10 to 1, 10 ROs for every car sold. Of course, if you're buying your own name, a lot of the calls are going to be for service. But it's very important tactically when dealers have stair-step programs they have to hit, or they're really trying to move metal, they need to know which campaigns are generating sales opportunities. Some basic keywords like Dodge dealer near me could be a service call, or it could be a sales call. We just don't know unless we're listening to the calls. And I will tell you more than ever, if we move into a slowing cycle, if we move into a recession, if this quarantine lasts longer with limited movement of people in society, man, more than ever, we need to know how our data can be used to make smarter marketing decisions. We need to be making data-driven marketing decisions. And of course, if the phone is 7-1 or 10-1 converting over lead forms, we need to get our acts together. And yet, I would say, Michael, over 50% of dealers are not adequately tracking their number one conversion channel, the phone. Mike, if a dealer wanted to get a demo of your current platform technology, where would they go?
That's a great question. I'd say first they can give me a holler, and I'll make sure they get taken care of. We're just like a lot of other folks. We're doing the work from home thing right now as well, but we're rallying around that as much as we can with some high spirits and good energy. So we'll make sure that anybody who wants to see some of these solutions, or honestly, Brian, just to talk about best practices. We've got a lot of current clients, or if you are just a dealer who, let's say you're not even using us, that's fine. If you're not sure what to do, or you're curious what's out there and how some simple phone routing could help, I can pitch you all day, but I can also give you some good tips and insights that we know and that we're hearing from other dealers. So reach out to CarWars. You'll have my email is just mike@carwars.com. Feel free to shoot me a note. Go to carwars.com. We've got our consultants and our salespeople, but our whole team is working every day, all day to help dealers right now. So reach out to us. Mike@carwars.com is a good place to start.
Great. Well, Mike, thank you for your time today. For dealers, let me summarize today's podcast in forms of actions. We're going through a trying time, and something in my gut tells me this may happen again. So remote workforce options, or to be able to turn on a remote workforce, is going to be something that automotive retailers are going to have to consider. And if you're not recording and tracking and scoring calls, how do you know if those calls are being handled properly? So you need the tech in place to do that. Number two, the number one way in which consumers convert today from advertising online is the phone, oftentimes 7 to 10-1. And as a result, if we're not inspecting how those calls come in, which campaigns generated those calls, we have no way of tuning our marketing dollars to hit our sales objectives. And thirdly, we've been putting off delivering an amazing phone experience for years. If any dealer was honest, I'd say, how's your people handling the phones? And typically they'll be like, man, not great. But that's just acceptable because dealers for the last number of years have been making a lot of money. Maybe this is a wake-up call for you. If you're a manager at a dealership, isn't it time for you to say, you know what? We inspect our calls, we manage to our process and our expectations of customer service. And yes, Brian, I think we're doing a great job. That would be a great turn of events from this very difficult time or period in our economy. If this is the first time you're listening to a podcast, I'd like you to know that every Monday I release a new podcast with innovators, leaders, and disruptors in the automotive community. We have a number of great interviews online. You could go to the iTunes store for podcasts and search for the Pash On podcast, but also the podcasts are on the Google Play Store, SoundCloud, on our native Libsyn, Libsyn platform. You can just go to brianpash.libsyn.com, of course, on my YouTube channel as well. So I wish everyone in the automotive industry a prayerful time of reflection, and I hope that we make smart decisions, not based on panic, but on wisdom. And of course, if I can help anyone as they're going through these challenging times, just give me an email to brian@brianpash.com, and we look forward to spending time with you on another podcast session.